I said what I said, that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
When the second most powerful figure in the United States publicly criticizes the British Prime Minister at the White House, this is no longer a domestic debate. It shows that Britain's policies are now directly affecting its closest allies. But long before the world began to react, people inside Britain were already living with the consequences of those policies every day. Higher taxes, rising costs, quiet restrictions on everyday freedoms. The international community is only starting to ask questions. The British public has been paying the price for much longer. This did not begin in Washington. What triggered international concern had already been taking shape inside Britain. Allies are not reacting to rhetoric. They are reacting to a pattern of consequences that can no longer be contained domestically. The first place policy shows its true cost is not the economy, but free speech. It does not take years in office to see the problem. The numbers are enough. In the UK today, around 30 people are arrested every single day for social media posts. Since Labour came into power, the total number of arrests has already reached into the thousands. Not for violence, not for organising attacks, but for words. One publicly cited case involved a woman sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for an online comment. No follow-up action, no real-world harm. The sentence itself became the crime. Another case involved a comedian arrested at Heathrow Airport by armed police over a tweet posted months earlier on a US-based platform. Enforcement did not wait for damage. It acted on interpretation. This is not free speech. It is conditional speech. No public bans are required, only risk. When people ask, how might this be interpreted before they speak, freedom has already ended. This is not a mistake. It is a system designed to make speech dangerous without formally banning it. And under the language of stability and responsibility, freedom is not removed. It is turned into a liability. Under Keir Starmer, Britain is operating with a tax burden of around 36 to 37% of GDP, the highest in decades, without the growth or productivity to support it. Real wages stagnate while living costs continue to rise. The pressure does not come from headline tax hikes. It comes from design. Tax thresholds are frozen. Fiscal drag quietly pulls millions of workers into higher tax bands without debate or consent. In this model, overtime is no longer encouraged. Second jobs are no longer rewarded. Additional labour is not treated as value creation, but as a larger tax base. When effort is taxed more heavily than productivity, the message is clear. Do not work harder. The gains will not be yours. This is not an unintended consequence. This is not an accident. The government is choosing to keep the budget running by taking more from people who work. The result is simple. People work more, but keep less. When urban workers are squeezed through income, the system does not stop there. Pressure shifts from wages to assets, from work to existence. And at that point, the target is no longer labour, but those who hold what cannot be moved, hidden or avoided. Farmers, land, family farms, the backbone that feeds Britain. Once income has been fully squeezed, the state moves further. The next targets are assets that cannot escape. Farmers do not hold liquid wealth. They hold land, machinery, livestock. Assets that cannot be moved, hidden, or fragmented without destroying production. In this framework, family farms are no longer treated as national food infrastructure. They are reclassified as taxable wealth. Under current inheritance rules, many farms can face a death tax of up to 20%, payable in cash. For a low margin, illiquid business, this is not a fiscal obligation. It is a liquidation order. Land is sold to pay tax. Equipment is stripped to retain ownership. Production shrinks to survive. This is not fairness. It is a governing choice that treats rural continuity as a one-off revenue source. When a government taxes the final moment of a working life, it does more than collect money. It severs generational transfer. And when land that feeds the nation is forced to break apart to fund the state, the backbone is no longer protected. It is being broken. Policy does not lie. Priorities do. Britain now spends billions of pounds each year on an immigration system it cannot control. Tens of thousands of crossings annually. Backlogs that never clear. Pressure pushed onto housing, healthcare, local councils and enforcement. Costs rise, outcomes do not. This is not a failure of compassion. It is a failure of state capacity. A system that consumes vast resources while producing instability is not underfunded. It is structured to manage consequences, not prevent them. At the same time, tens of thousands of British veterans face housing insecurity, limited mental health support, and delayed access to services they were promised. This is not a policy gap, it is a priority gap. A government that can spend without limit to manage governance failure, yet cannot reliably meet its obligations to those who served it, is not making a mistake. It is making a choice. These are not isolated issues. They align too cleanly to be accidental. Speech is managed through risk. Income is extracted through fiscal design. Assets are taxed at points that cannot be avoided. Public funds are consumed to sustain systems that do not deliver results. One logic, one direction. Decision-making is centralized. Responsibility is diffused. Pressure is pushed downward. No one is directly accountable for outcomes. Consequences are explained, reframed, or delayed. In this model, citizens are no longer treated as participants. They are treated as variables to be adjusted. When effort no longer leads to stability, when compliance no longer brings protection, when contribution no longer secures continuity, trust does not explode. It drains away. Pressure can run a system for a while, but pressure does not create legitimacy. This is not just a story about Britain. It is a lesson in how a country can change without people noticing at first. There is no law that announces freedom is gone. There is no order that openly says rights are being reduced. It happens gradually. Speaking becomes riskier. Earning is taxed more heavily. Owning land and assets becomes harder. Obligations increase while protection weakens. Each policy, taken alone, can be explained. But taken together, people start to live differently. They speak less. They hesitate more. They accept more. That is when the problem begins. Because when people stop questioning power, power stops explaining itself. Decisions become more distant. Accountability becomes harder to trace. Mistakes are reframed instead of corrected. Over time, citizens are no longer treated as participants in governance, but as individuals to be managed, regulated, and adjusted. A society does not lose freedom in a single moment. It loses freedom when caution replaces confidence in everyday life. The value of this analysis is not to provoke anger. It is to remind people of something simple. When citizens no longer feel free to speak, question, or challenge power, every policy, no matter its name, becomes heavier over time. And in the end, the cost is not paid by those in power. It is paid by ordinary people. What often gets lost in policy debates is the human scale. Policies do not fall on spreadsheets. They fall on kitchens, farms, small businesses, and living rooms. They fall on people who worked their entire lives believing that effort would bring security, that honesty would be enough, that the rules would not quietly change at the finish line. When trust erodes, people do not protest first. They retreat. They delay retirement plans. They stop investing in their children's future. They hold back, conserve, and brace. That quiet withdrawal is more damaging than any public anger. Because a society does not weaken when people shout. It weakens when people stop believing participation matters. And when enough citizens feel that the system no longer works for them, the damage is not immediate, but it is lasting. No budget line can repair that.